because we're often busy and we generate content more and more and more. But very often we get into the status quo, right? As in the morning keynote, Dr. Aditya mentioned that we seldom question the status quo, right? We are very reactive often in our jobs that we get an assignment, we finish the assignment, we get the second assignment, we generate more content. We write for more features, we write for more products, and that's how we operate. But the question is, do we really question the status quo and see what can be done differently? What small changes can we bring in our style of working so that we can reclaim the glory? I mean, we add value to the business by reducing the number of support costs. That's how we justify our return on investment. And very often we even generate leads for the business because a person who is trying to buy a product and wants to compare it with the competition, they often get down to the level of reading the technical content and comparing the feature stack and then take an informed decision. But we can always shift some key levers, some very easy to do things and add more value or at least show more value on how we operate. So a little bit more about myself, like I was introduced as I work as a product manager with Adobe Systems and I take care of the technical communication products like Robohelp, Maker and the entire TCS which includes the Captivate, Acrobat and Presenter. So I am responsible for product strategy and roadmap. I take care of our vibrant partner ecosystem, all the people who are affiliates, who create more content about our products, who train people about our products, and I'm also responsible for customer relationships. So if you have something good to share about our products, please feel free to reach out to us. And I'll always be happy to take your rants on what is not working in Robohelp and FrameMaker, and we'll try to resolve them at the earliest. I tweet at that handle _Adobe PC. Thanks to the resolution, it's meant for widescreen, but it has ended up here, so all that is in notes. But it's _Adobe PC. And I only tweet about technical communication. So today's presentation is divided into 3 parts. I'll be mostly talking about 3 key levers, and we'll be talking about how to do more with less. The first one being how to go lean. Lean really is an old term by now. It was coined by Toyota in the 1980s, but in today's world it has become more like a cliche. We all know like product development talks about lean, manufacturing talks about lean, but we just try to understand how we can adopt lean in its simplistic way and do more with less. So lean is represented by that feedback cycle which just talks about plan, do, check, act, we call that PDCA. In the second part of our presentation, we'll talk about measuring. What to measure, how to measure, and how to add value by what to measure. So knowledge is power. We'll learn what to measure in our technical content. That adds value. So we'll see how to analyze the key metrics and optimize our offering. In the last part, we'll talk about the most important persona in our value chain, people whom we write content about. How to engage them and add value to the entire system. So, talking about the first part, lean, we'll try to understand what, why and how of lean. What really lean means for us being technical communicators, why should we go lean, and what simple steps can we take and add quick value. By the way, in this presentation, we are not talking about rocket science at all. We are talking about very simple things we all know. We all know that taking a 30 minutes walk in the morning will lead to good health and whatever and glowing face. But how many of us actually do that nowadays? I'm sure a lot of us will be doing that. But in this presentation, we're going to talk about some very simple things like that. It's just a reminder of what else can we do differently so that we are in the position to reclaim our glory and not just being reactive and writing more and more. So first of all, why lean? It's not a very subjective, boring presentation. I've included some data insights, but as I mentioned that we are often seen as cost centers in our companies. We do not generate business, like product development builds products that are sold. Microsoft built Microsoft Office and they've been selling it since years, and it's a product that commands 86% profit margins. So that is a revenue generating engine for any company. Sales actually sell, they touch the customer and they generate direct revenue. But the reality of our jobs is that we are seen as cost centers. And business is always demanding efficiency. So in our annual survey, 72% of the respondents mentioned that their budgets are either stable and some of them even said that budgets are reducing. This is a hard reality with budgets. We never see that we got more budgets, and as Mark was saying earlier that we have lots of budgets to travel to all the various conferences and we just glorify our profession, but the reality is that budgets are often reduced. And then 40% of the people said that there is an increase in workload. And what attributes this increase in the workload? So there's more to do, more deadlines, more products being created, more devices to cater to. So we hear about responsive HTML5, migrate from chunk to web help to responsive HTML5, make your content readable on mobile devices, develop a content-centric app for your iPads, and have your content available on multitude of devices. And then more languages, so you deal with translators on and off, and then more technologies to comprehend. So if you are supposed to do API documentation, well that's a skill set you have to learn, evolve. So there is like always more to do. The business is asking more and more, but the budgets are shrinking. So the real question there is how to do more with less. And very often we find ourselves in this situation where we are trying to pack too much stuff with limited skill set, with limited people. So I'm sure a lot of us would really feel themselves in this situation. So we understood why we need to go lean. Now trying to understand what actually lean means in our products. So lean really means two things in our context. Avoid waste and then iterate very quickly. You might not have a first cut output which is just fantastic, except that. Have a habit of iterating very quickly. So my first point is avoid content bloat. Do not overpack your documentation with stuff you don't really need. We know that an empty help page doesn't look very nice, but if something can be told in 3 lines, do not try to fill up the entire page. Go lean about it. You'll save a lot of your time, you'll save money in translations, and you'll save money in reviewers' time, and if there is less which can communicate the same meaning, always prefer that. So waste means two kinds of waste. First one is the non-value added content, which doesn't really add any value, but it's a lot of English because we are good at writing. Do not do that. And the second thing is non-value added activities with the documentation process. The conventional DDLs, you try to Google it down and you'll see how we go about it. We collect requirements, we make a strategy, we write something, go for review, then ask them what outputs they need, what languages do they need the content in. And it's a very conventional way of doing things. But what lean really means is generate that minimal content that will add deliberate value and then iterate on it. Iterate based on users' feedback, iterate based on the subject matter experts' feedback, and very quickly, the faster you do it, the better the content gets at the earliest. So rapidly iterate would mean align with your ongoing agile development. So in agile we have a philosophy of lean into product development. The need of the hour is to generate working prototypes every 3 weeks. Does the documentation follow the same process? In a lot of companies we have seen it does, but even in our company, which is Adobe, we create the entire product and then we pass it on to the documentation team that hey, go forward. So they are tasked with something which sounds very Herculean, something which was created by a team of 25 developers over 6 months has been given to a technical writer to be finished in 2 weeks. Unfair, right? So align with the agile development. Every 3 weeks, whatever is coming out, try to document that. There might be a lot of throwaway pieces in that because things are changing, but that's the better way to go about it. You'll develop better understanding of the product, you'll know what are the challenges with the product, and you'll be able to do better justice to it. So align with the ongoing agile development and adopt a minimalistic approach. Minimalistic is a cool term, right? What minimalistic really means. So in product development, guys have got it really well what minimalistic means. We call it an MVP. It's a term coined by Eric Ries of the famous book. He's an author of the famous book, The Lean Startup. That's where he he mentions about minimum viable product, how you can create products which are minimum viable in nature. But in our case, I have underlined the viable part of it, that while creating minimalistic content, do not get overwhelmed by the minimal part of it and you forget about it that it's not very viable. We created so less content that people are hardly able to make sense of it. So that's a representative picture when we are doing product development. We are asked to build in steps and build small parts in steps. So the first part, with an objective of building a car that can take a person from point A to point B, we just created one wheel first, then we connected two wheels with an axle, created a body, then assembled everything to form a car. It doesn't solve my purpose until I reach the final step. But in case of creating a minimum viable product, we have to follow the second approach, where we first build some rollers and provide a medium to the user so that he can actually travel from point A to point B, and then iterate very quickly to build the entire prototype and then the final product. So that's the representative. I'm sure you'll be able to relate it to your work where you're generating content. Let's say you're writing content for a minimum viable product that has 5 screens at the moment. Try to justify the entire end-to-end workflow in the first cut output that you generate, and then iterate it so that it gets better and more wholesome. So start questioning the business, that who needs this information? Who am I creating all this content for? When do they need it and when can we really phase it in? So we are building a prototype and we are going to launch a public beta. How many people are going to consume our content? Are there going to be trainings, webinars around that? Can we leverage all that part and create somewhat minimum content and then really detail it by the time, which means writing in phases? What's the purpose of this document? Is it a legal finding that whenever we are creating a product, you have to have a thick, fat PDF supporting that? Or is it just going to be a very, very lean thing where I'm just telling a user or helping a user how to go from point A to point B? So different documents have different purposes. If you're writing for healthcare industry, I'm sure this approach will not work. But if you're writing for a web-based e-commerce startup, I'm sure this approach will work. If you just need to help a seller to onboard him to a platform where he can just go quickly and start selling, you need to take the lean approach, and then you generate more and more content so that they feel better. So that can come when users are demanding content for you. How can we shorten the timeline by reducing the non-value adding content? So that's, I've already covered, like how to reduce waste. And then what the customer actually needs and wants. So never leave the customer out of sight whenever you're writing content. Oops. I did not start speaking loudly all of a sudden, something happened there, not my mistake. So when we are building products in the agile mode, we always keep the customer in loop and we show them whatever we are creating every 3 weeks. So have a dummy customer for yourself who will proofread for you and will tell you whether it's making sense in entirety, and then build an iteration. And then ask them that how can we improve the content easily over the time. Like that's what I covered as part of iteration. The second most important part of going lean is collaboration. Of course, we are not experts of the product and we are good at writing, we are good at comprehending stuff, but we are not experts of some very complicated things. So we often need to collaborate. And we collaborate with the subject matter experts who are the gurus of a particular technology. And that's how our entire workflow goes. So we create content, we send it for review, they come back with comments, they give 20 comments, we incorporate 7 of them, 13 of them they ignore. That really generates a substandard document and nobody is really happy with it very often. So the beauty of the lean process lies in quick iteration. And for an iteration, you really need better tools that serve you well. A lot of big organizations would tie their writing tools with a CMS where they have the entire review workflow going. A lot of you would use SharePoint for collaborative authoring. But there are multitude of tools available that would solve the job. But think first what tools are helping you to write more efficiently and review seamlessly, because without review, the output is always going to be substandard. The data also says so, that collaboration with subject matter experts is important and it's becoming more critical. So We understand that 60% of the people say that the need for collaboration is almost consistent. Whatever we were doing is good enough and we are going ahead with that. But 31% people said that the need to collaborate is increasing. Increasing means they are asked to collaborate more and more with the subject matter experts. And then more than 30% of the respondents, they agree with the fact that they need better tools to collaborate with the subject matter experts. So when we say better tools, what does that really mean? What makes for a good review product? The first thing, the product that we are using for review should have a very close resemblance to the actual output. You should not be just sending some PDF or Word document for review, which is just representative of the actual product. Whatever you want others to review should have very close resemblance and the content should be easy to annotate. So end user should be able to do a lot of things on that output. They should be able to comment on that, they should be able to make insertions, deletions, and so on and so forth. So it should be really easy to annotate, similar to a Word output. Please mind it, I am not saying use Word for review, that's a bad practice. Word documents can only get lost in emails and then it's a lossy transition. Like every iteration you lose a couple of comments and then the number exponentially rises. The second attribute of a good review process is continuous iterations. So you should be able to update the content seamlessly. Let's say you wrote version 1, send it for review, you make quick changes, you're able to push version 2, version 3 and the reviewers get a notification that a new version is available. So it should be very seamless without much of an effort, it should work like that out of the box. And the central source should be updated. Like if you're using Word documents which are not checked into SharePoint and you're sending them through emails, very often you're relying on end user smartness to version it, save a local copy and always review the latest version. And very often we are confused that who is reviewing which version because we get in 250 of them in just 1 week. And the last thing is conversation between reviewers. On that final output that you have sent for review, are end users able to collaborate? So there is a jargon that you have put in there and some reviewer put a comment on that. Are they able to collaborate on that topic right there? Is it enabling that? And then divergent parties should be able to discuss during the time of disagreement because very often we write something which is not so clear or a little bit controversial. So we have to provide our SMEs a platform where they can collaborate. And occasionally you can chip into the conversations right there. So think about it. There must be a lot of tools available there. Some work like this out of the box. Some might require some help from the IT teams. But this is the true picture of a good review tool. The second part of our presentation, I'll be taking care of time because we don't want to keep you all hungry for a long time. But the second part of this is analyze, which is understanding your customers because knowledge is power. We have heard about this a lot of times. But I just want a show of hands. How many of us actually use content analytics for the content that we write? Like, how many of you are using Google Analytics or any other analytics tool and constantly measure? Okay, I see 7, 8, 10 hands. That's really good. But we see that a lot of people are still not using content analytics. Whereas it's real dead easy if you want to see how the traffic is coming, how is it trending. Whenever there's a new release or a new feature being introduced, it is trending up. How many people from which geographies are coming. So as Adobe, like we generate a help in 35 languages or how many? So approximately that much. But our content analytics will tell us that we seldom get used in Russian language. Or there was like almost zilch traffic in XYZ language. And we are just doing it because it's a mandate, all teams do that. But does it really require that much effort? If majority of the content is coming from North America, plain English should work and save a lot of money in translations. So that's what I say, analyze. So measure traffic and justify return on content. We've always heard return on investment, and for us it's always return on content. So what really we should measure? We should measure most and least frequently visited topics. If, let's say, you're working for an enterprise software company, and after deploying the platform, people are just not able to sign in. So they are looking for some single sign-on techniques. So is that the most frequently visited topic? If yes, then probably that needs to be taken with more care and that needs to be made more searchable. People should be able to identify that real quick because that's the onboarding step. And if you write that part well, the time to value incredibly reduces. So if somebody buys a software and it takes them a few months to come up to speed when they are able to set up the entire thing, that time to value is actually reduced if they are able to find the content more easily. So that's where the return on content picture kicks in. The second thing is you need to know where the traffic is coming from. It could be context sensitive health that we call CSH. Is it coming organically? Organically would mean somebody is coming on to health.xyz.com and then looking for content, or the lead is coming from Google. So it's all about understanding your customers, how and where they are coming to your platform to consume that content. What language or locale they are consuming your content in. What is the device type? So very often, like we did a survey in mobile publishing and around 25% of people said that they are publishing content to mobile because their management asked them to do so. Or competition is doing so. Some other product has a content-centric app, so I need to have one. Or it's just cool to have an iPad app. But data can actually guide you to the right place. If a lot of people have started reading your documentation on mobile, then it's better to have content-centric app that just lets them consume the content offline on their mobile phones. Search statistics. We'll see how search statistics can help you. And then time spent per topic and bounce rate. If people are coming, they're not able to find anything useful, they just bounce on. So it's very, very important to keep the bounce rate low. When you're showing that metrics to business, you need to tell them that people are actually spending time on the health system and they are finding things useful there. And then how's the multimedia consumption? Are people really interested in watching videos or they are still interested in reading the long text? And it would really depend on the demographics. Like if you have very, very senior audience, they are still very methodical in their approach, they would like to read the all documents. But if somebody who is a manager persona or somebody who doesn't have that much time and who can get that quick thing done by just watching a 10 minutes video, you need to measure that. And by doing A/B testing, like providing both formats available, you can measure which is getting consumed more and then take your strategy accordingly. You can also feed the analytics inside directly to the product team or the sales team. How can you do that? Search statistics. Analyze what users are not able to find. If somebody comes onto your health system, they are trying to find how they can make something work and they are not able to find. Probably that feature doesn't exist. But it makes sense to have that feature because n number of customers are constantly looking for something like that. So if you have that kind of data, that's like product intelligence. And that intelligence is gold. Trust me, we as product managers are sometimes blindfolded. We don't really know what customers want. Because we have limited touch points like these conferences to understand your pain points. But that can be generated from the help. What is the frequently visited content? So that's a good thing for the writers that my page got 4,000 hits, but that's really a bad thing for the product because people struggle in using that feature. That's why they're frequently visiting that content. And then end user feedback on topics. Enable your end users to provide feedback. I'm sure there will be resistance in doing this because it requires your action. If people are responding to your content and nobody is answering them, that's like added work. That's why it often gets a pushback in larger organizations. But buying the bullet and enable end user feedback on topics. And then the demographics content. It would tell the product team that which year is more important for you. It would tell the marketing team where to spend more dollars on. Let's say our products are selling a lot in North America, but Japan used to be a very important market for us where we are losing. So this data can be a very good insight for the marketing team to start spending more dollars in some other geography. So this data can be very, very useful for other parts of the organization, which you people will own. So feed this insight directly to the product team. More of a cyclic loop. And it's not just a subjective slide, even survey insights say so. So as part of survey, around 42% of the respondents said that they plan to do an user engagement. Around 31% said that they plan to use content analytics, use something like Google Analytics or any other paid analytics tool for measuring content. And some are mavericks who would say that they even want end users to create or edit content. That's the Wikipedia model where anybody can suggest something, you analyze it, you review it, and then you factor it in. By enabling end user engagement, you take your first step to being customer-centric. What customer centricity really means? It means walking a mile in customer shoes. Once in a while, you should just actually open your products and try hitting F1 where do you land up. Is that thing really useful? How easy is it to reach to the content that you've been looking for? Perform a Google search and see if you are able to find something, or you need to get back to your basics and improve the sitemap and search indexing of your tool. Know your ideal customer, which is the user persona. So if I create tools which are used by 50 plus years, people who are generally located in North America, then I would address that part of audience in a separate way compared to if I have 19 something people using my content in some other GMs. So know the user persona whom you're writing for. Focus on usability. So usability would mean like if you try to open some of the modern health systems, like try to go to Gmail Health, it is very minimalistic, very easily you will be able to find what you're looking for, and the page is not very crowded. So any user who is already coming to your health system, he already has a problem. That's why he's there. He's trying to solve this pain point and he's trying to look for some information. So make it very easy. Make the content accessible. Always focus on usability. Users should be able to get there through any channel by hitting F1, coming from Google, typing your health URL, make it easy for him. And use simple language, that's a no-brainer. And then I talked about accessibility. And always remember that you cannot please everyone. Because if the product is used by a wide gamut of people, you will not be able to please everyone. So that's okay. If you are able to take care of 80% of the audience and they are happy with the health content, we should be happy. The next thing is about feedback and rating. The doctor is actually within. So if you enable feedback and complaints, they are an excellent source of information. So let people rant about your product. Make sure you are responsive to them. If the feature doesn't exist, they would be happy that we have fed this intelligence back to the product team and this is as part of roadmap, or this is the reason why this feature doesn't make that much sense, or if they're struggling to find content, maybe making it a little bit more elaborate, or having a quick how-to video. So if you just enable that feedback and complaint widget on your page, that's something that will help you analyze the issues with your content, and that would be a first step in fixing it. So coming to the final leg of it, summarizing. In conclusion, today's technical communicators should be doing few things differently. They should be catering to their audience wherever they are. That means if somebody is working on an oil rig, he cannot carry paper documentation on a laptop with him because he is wearing gloves and all. So he needs to be able to have content on an iPad which he can just access offline, anywhere, something like that. So you should be able to cater to your audience wherever they do. That's the need of it. Second thing is focusing on not just creating content but also efficiency. The thing that we talked about, lean. So the content has to be lean, it has to iterate quickly and then get better with the time. And the last part is engaging with the audience and becoming more analytical. So measure what you are building and measure how people are consuming your content. And then use that knowledge to make them better over the time. And use that knowledge to show the return on content on your products. How you can do that? A lot of times, like, you would hear that you are taking care of a 30 years old product. So Framemaker will be celebrating 30-year anniversary right now. And we are often asked that we redo the entire thing. Is it really possible? Not really. So in that matrix, there are often like, the best quadrant is the top left-hand corner where the impact is high and the effort is relatively low. So of course we cannot redo the entire thing because that follows on the top quadrant on right hand side, where the impact will be high but the effort is really high. But there are always those small little things that you can do that will have a high impact. And always try to place any new action item that you would like to take on, to put it on this matrix on where really this would lie. If you are creating a short how-to video, if that requires like a week or so, that could have a very high impact. So that makes sense to do that. Whereas if it is about a tall guide with 450 pages and it would go as a usual part of the release, what value that would actually do? And try to make changes by putting whatever change you are trying to do on this. And of course, just like fine wine, a healthy health system improves with age. It's the same thing that I used in the beginning, that if you start walking 30 minutes every day, you'll have an increase of great body, less cholesterol, and all those things. So use these measures and let them stay for some time. They'll take time to start taking. So we got all these insights by running our annual service. Our annual survey is right now on. Let us know how you are using the products, how you are using the insights, and what tools you are using, what are your workflows for technical communication, and of course you can win all those exciting prizes. So the URL is survey.doyourightwrite.com, and the U is not YOU, it's doyourightwrite. You'll have a copy of these slides. So these insights will help us to come back to you with better statistics, better data, and that will help all of us to make things better. Thank you very much for patiently listening. And if there are any questions,